This is The Mountain Is You by Brianna Wiest. In this video, I'll be summarizing the entire book down to a simple, easy to follow, 5-step process that will help you go from self-sabotage to self-mastery, and also how I apply this to my personal life as well. A few years ago, I worked an office job. I hated it, so one day I decided to try starting a new business to escape that life. The only free time I had was on the weekends though, so I time blocked almost the entire weekend to work on it. I would look forward to the weekend thinking about how I'd be super productive and get an extra 15 hours of work done. But when the weekend came, I lost all of my motivation, and I found myself literally just binge watching Netflix for 15 hours straight instead. This went on for weeks, months maybe. And one particular weekend, I found myself watching the most terrible TV series I've ever seen in my life. It's called Insatiable. It was the trashiest show I've ever seen. It has a Rotten Tomatoes rating of 12%. Every bit of my brain was screaming at me, begging me to stop watching this ridiculous show, but I still couldn't. It just felt so good in the time to just procrastinate, and I actually finished both seasons of that horrible show over just one weekend, and I didn't spend a single minute working on my new business at all. Back then, I kind of just told myself that I was just lazy, I was just procrastinating. But now, after reading this book, I came to realize that I wasn't exactly procrastinating. I was actually stuck. I had a mountain in front of me that was blocking my path, and I couldn't get to the other side. There was this gap between where I was, which was in an office job I didn't like, and where I wanted to be, which is running my own business. And the solution isn't difficult. Just spend time on the weekends working and starting to learn how to build a new business. But I couldn't even bring myself to do that, and it went on for a really long time. This is self-sabotage. That mountain blocking my path was me this whole time. Do you have a similar gap in your life? A gap between where you are now and where you want to be? And you know you want to move forward. You have the solution in mind, but you can't bring yourself to do it. It feels like there's a mountain in front of you blocking your path. If your answer is yes, then you may also be sabotaging yourself. In this book, I love that Brianna gives very specific examples of different types of self-sabotage, and this was by far the most helpful part for me, and I'll try to summarize the most important ones now. First, resistance. Resistance is what happens when we have a new project that we need to work on and simply can't bring ourselves to do it. It's when we get into a great new relationship and then keep bailing on plans. We often feel resistance in the face of what's going right in our lives, not what's going wrong. Resistance is your way of slowing down and making sure that it's safe to get attached to something new and important. In other cases, it can also be a warning sign that something isn't quite right, and you might need to step back and regroup. Resistance is not the same thing as procrastination or indifference. When we experience resistance, there is always a reason, and we have to pay attention. Second, hitting your upper limit. There is only a certain amount of happiness that most of us will allow ourselves to feel. This is called the upper limit. When you begin to surpass your upper limit, you start to unconsciously sabotage what's happening in order to bring yourself back to what's comfortable and familiar. It may seem totally counterintuitive, but we are not really wired to be happy. We are wired to be comfortable. And anything that is outside of that realm of comfort feels threatening or scary until we are familiar with it. The way you solve an upper limit problem is by slowly acclimating yourself to your new normal. Instead of shocking yourself into big changes, allow yourself to slowly adjust and adapt. Third, uprooting. This happens when someone finds themselves jumping from relationship to relationship or changing their business website again and again, when what they really need to focus on is confronting relationship issues when they arise or taking care of clients they already have. It might be constantly needing a fresh start, which is often the result of not having healthy ways to deal with stress or struggling with conflict resolution. To resolve this, first recognize the pattern. Trace your steps over the past few years. How many places have you moved or worked? Then figure out what is driving you away from each new thing you find. Next, you need to get clear on what you really want. Sometimes uprooting occurs because we step too quickly toward what we think we want, only to find that we didn't quite think it through and don't really want that thing very much. When the moment comes that you would typically flee or uproot, confront the discomfort and stay where you are. Figure out why you are getting uncomfortable, getting attached to one thing or another. Fourth, perfectionism. When we expect that our work must be perfect the first time we do it, we end up getting into a cycle of perfectionism. This happens because we are afraid of failing or feeling vulnerable or not being as good as we want others to think we are, and we end up avoiding the work that is required to actually become that good. To resolve this, don't worry about doing it well. Just do it. Don't worry about writing a bestseller. Just write. Don't worry about making a Grammy-winning hit. Just make music. Don't worry about failing, just keep showing up and trying. Instead of perfectionism, focus on progress. Instead of having something done perfectly, focus on just getting it done. From there, you can edit, build, grow, and develop it to exactly what your vision is. But if you don't get started, you'll never arrive. Fifth, disorganization. By leaving our lives and spaces in disarray, we are not just mindlessly forgetting to take care of our surroundings. We are often actually creating distractions and chaos that serve an unconscious purpose. To declutter and reorganize, start with one room, and if that is too much, start with one corner, drawer, or closet. The key here is to start slow and adjust yourself over time. 6. Attachment to what you don't really want. Sometimes your dreams for your life are adopted from other people's preferences. In other cases, you determine what you want and then you outgrow your old ambitions. Sometimes we fight endlessly to try to force ourselves to do something that we don't really want, and it always leaves us empty because it isn't a genuine desire. When you find yourself struggling with something, you have to ask yourself this: do I really want this? Do I really want the job, or do I just like how the title sounds? Am I really in love with this person, or do I like the idea of this relationship? Be willing to accept that maybe your success story doesn't look the way that you once thought it might. 7th, judging others. This actually does far more damage than we realize to our own success. For example, if we feel bad about not being as successful as another person, we might try to find something negative about them to make ourselves feel better. If we do that every time we come across a person who is more successful than we are, we begin to associate that level of success with being disliked. When it comes time for us to take action to move our lives forward, we're gonna resist doing it because becoming more successful will create a breach in our self-concept. To resolve this, practice non-judgment through non-assumption. Instead of reaching a conclusion about a person based on the limited information you have about them, consider that you're not seeing the whole picture and you don't know the whole story. 8th, fear of failing. This fear is often something that holds people back from putting in the work they would need to become truly great at something. There is a difference between failing because you are trying something new and daring, and failing because you are not showing up, doing the work, or being responsible for your actions. As scary as it might be to not be great at something initially, or perhaps even experience a loss, it is even worse to fail by virtue of never trying and always playing small. When we fail out of negligence, we take a step back. When we fail because we are attempting new feats, we take one step closer to what will work. And 9th, unhealthy habits. This is the most common way that people sabotage their own success, by maintaining habits that are actually keeping them away from their goals. For example, this happens when someone declares that they want to be in better shape, but doesn't change anything they do each day to facilitate that. Define health on your own terms. What does a healthy life look like for you? Also, decide what combination of healthy eating, exercise, and sleep is right for you and stick to it. Then, establish your habits gradually. Instead of trying to force yourself to take an hour at the gym at 6 a.m., try instead to do just 15 minutes. There are many other types of self-sabotage, and I probably went through only about half of them. Also, everything you saw on the screen were quotes that I lifted directly from the book to preserve as much of the beautiful writing as possible. Remember the story I told you at the beginning? After reading through the types of self-sabotage, I realized that my procrastination was actually a little bit of perfectionism and a lot of, the fear of failing. My new business idea was the next step to better my life. In my mind, I was going to be successful and escape my office job, but I had this subconscious, unconscious fear that if I actually tried to do this and I found out that it was too hard and I couldn't succeed, my dreams of escaping my office job would be completely dashed. Just like that. So to keep that dream alive, I actually procrastinated starting work on it for as long as I could until one day that tension really wore into me and broke me down, and that was what sparked me out of it. There are also a few other ways to tell if you're in a self-sabotaging cycle, just in case you don't feel like you're identifying with anything I've listed above. Take note that these signs can be extremely subtle and barely recognizable. They often don't come to our attention until they become highly problematic and someone else points them out. Some of the most prominent symptoms of self-sabotage are as follows. 1. You are more aware of what you don't want than what you do. 2. You spend more time trying to impress people who don't like you than you spend with people who love you for who you are. 3. You are putting your head into the sand. 4. You care more about convincing other people you're okay rather than actually being okay. 5. Your main priority in life is to be liked, even if that comes at the expense of being happy. 6. You're more afraid of your feelings than anything else. 7. You're blindly chasing goals without asking yourself why you want those things. 8. You're treating your coping mechanisms as the problem. 9. You value your doubt more than your potential. 10. You're trying to care about everything. 11. You don't realize how far you've come. I put these important pages on the screen so you can pause them anytime to read more about them if you wish to. If all else fails, nothing resonates with you above, just listen to your gut, like what I told you in the story right at the beginning of this video. Where are you instinctively unhappy in your life, where there's a gap between where you are and where you want to be? If you don't remember anything else from this first step, just remember this very question and kind of try to reflect on it. Now, when you start to identify your self-sabotaging behaviors, negative emotions may bubble up to the surface. But instead of forcing them away or ignoring them, you should learn to interpret them. And that takes us to step 2, interpreting negative emotions. And Brianna here gives 8 very helpful negative emotion interpretations to help us along the way. First, anger. Contrary to what you might think, it is healthy to be angry, and anger can also show us important aspects of who we are and what we care about. For example, if someone makes a passing but slightly insulting remark about one of our loved ones, our anger in response to that shows that we care about that person. It is only when anger turns into aggression and we take that energy out on those around us that it becomes unhealthy. Second, sadness. This is a normal and correct response to the loss of something you love very much, like a relationship, a job, or just a general idea of what you thought your life would be. Sadness only becomes problematic when we do not allow ourselves to go through the natural phases of grief. Don't feel embarrassed to cry or miss what you no longer have. In fact, crying at appropriate times is one of the biggest signs of mental health, as people who are struggling often find it difficult to release their feelings. Third, guilt. Guilt tends to affect us more for what we didn't do than what we did. It requires us to look deeply at our behaviors. If we have treated others unfairly, we must be able to admit, apologize, and correct that behavior. However, if the feeling of guilt is more generalized and not specifically relating to any one incident, we need to look closely at who or what made us always feel as though we were wrong or inconveniencing others. Fourth, embarrassment. This is what we feel when we know that we did not behave in a way that we are proud of. When we do not process embarrassment, it turns into something darker, which is shame, that may cause us to condemn ourselves as human beings. Fifth, jealousy. This is a cover-up emotion. It presents as anger or judgment when in reality it is sadness and dissatisfaction. If you want to know what you truly want out of life, look at the people who you are jealous of. If not interpreted correctly, jealousy can turn into something darker and cause us to engage in self-sabotaging behaviors like what we talked about in the first step. 6. Resentment. When we resent people, it is often because they did not live up to the expectation of them that we had in our minds. However, other people are under no obligation to live up to our ideas of them. Instead, what we must do is reinvent our image of those around us or those we have perceived as having wronged us. 7th, regret. Regret shows us not what we wish we could have done in the past, but what we absolutely need to change going forward. Didn't travel when you were young? Regret is showing you that you should do it now. Didn't love someone while you had them? Regret is showing you that you should appreciate people now. 8th, chronic fear. Chronic fearful thinking often comes back down to feeling the need to focus our energy and attention on a potential threat so we can protect ourselves from it. We imagine that if we are worried, anxious, or angry about it, it will remain in our awareness and therefore cannot surprise us. We can sort of like retain some control over it. So instead of trying to avoid what we cannot control, learn to simply shrug and say, if that happens, it happens. Again, everything you saw before on the screen are all quotes from the book because she writes beautifully and lovingly. In my story several years ago, the biggest negative emotion is obviously regret. Why did I waste all that time? Why didn't I put in more effort? But regret as I may, I can't turn back the clock. So like what Brianna says, I absolutely need to change this going forward and not waste any more time procrastinating. Now, the next step, so step 3, from self-sabotage to self-mastery, is to meet your highest potential future self, and Brianna provides an amazing exercise in this book that I thought was super helpful to do so. The main goal for this exercise is to identify the end goals of your life and then work like backwards to see what you need to do each day, each week, each month, and each year to kind of like get there. First, sit down in a quiet place with your journal. Next, close your eyes and begin a meditation session. Imagine sitting down at a comfortable table in a well-lit room, somewhere that you feel happy and feel at peace. Then invite your future self to come sit with you and talk. Specifically ask for the highest possible version of yourself to sit down. Now, pay attention to what they look like, how they behave, and what their facial expressions communicate. See what they wear, how they feel, and what they do each day. These will be the keys to your own becoming. After that, ask for guidance and keep yourself open to whatever this person wants to share with you. The messages should be positive, uplifting, affirming, and helpful. Even if they communicate something to you, like for example, you need to let go of this relationship, it should be done in a way that is so calming and reaffirming that you are confident and at peace with it. And finally, imagine your future self handing you the keys to your new life. This could be the keys to the home you live in, or your wedding band, and anything else that is a part of your highest possible future life. Now that you know the end goals of your life, it's time to put a plan together. But before you do so, please remember that you shouldn't be sitting around waiting for some huge breakthrough to change your life. Instead, your life changes through this thing that Brianna calls microshifts. Think of microshifts as tiny increments of change in your day-to-day life. A microshift is changing what you eat for one part of one meal just one time. Then it's doing that a second time and a third. Before you even realize what's happening, you've adopted a pattern of behavior. If you want to change your life, you need to make tiny, nearly undetectable decisions every hour of every day until those choices are habituated. Then you'll just continue to do them. If you want to spend less time on your phone, deny yourself the chance to check it one less time today. If you want to eat healthier, drink half a cup of water today. If you want to sleep more, go to bed 10 minutes earlier tonight than you did last night. If you want to exercise, do it now for just 10 minutes. If you want to read just one page. If you want to meditate, do so for just 30 seconds. Change your life through microshifts, not singular, huge breakthroughs. That's step 4, microshifts. And the 5th step here is to be prepared for what Brianna calls adjustment shock. Anything that is new, even if it is good, will feel uncomfortable until it also feels familiar. Our brain works the opposite way too, in that whatever is familiar is what we perceive to be good and comfortable. And even if those behaviors, habits, or relationships are actually toxic or destructive. Basically, our brains are very simple. Familiar equals comfort. Unfamiliar equals discomfort. A positive life change is still change. It's still unfamiliar, which equals discomfort. On top of that, we have what Brianna calls the silent assumption that because this is a positive thing, that it should eliminate all our anxieties and stress and tension. And we are going to be even more disappointed when we find out that that isn't quite the case. Some great examples are weddings, childbirth, pregnancy, a new job. All of these actually elicit more stress into our lives than not. To cope with this, I think being aware that adjustment shock exists in the first place is a great starting point. Get rid of the assumption that a positive life change will rid you of any anxiety and stress, because it's not gonna happen. Another coping strategy is being aware of any hypervigilance, paranoia, or intense fears you might have about your new life change. For example, if you have a new happy relationship, you might potentially become paranoid about infidelity and lies. Or if you got yourself a new job, perhaps your mind immediately shifts to what could potentially get you fired and lose the job you've always dreamt of. Tell yourself that these are just symptoms of adjustment shock and slowly work towards breaking down these symptoms. So that's basically the entire mental framework for the 5-step process towards overcoming the mountain inside of you. And these steps will help you move from where you are now to where you want to be. Now, you maybe perhaps think that my life is so much better now that I'm sort of like a full-time content creator. I managed to quit my job a couple years ago, and now I do truly love my work. When I read this book, I realized that I'm actually still sabotaging myself in many ways. The biggest self-sabotage for me right now is money. In step one of the symptoms of being in a self-sabotaging cycle is putting your head in the sand. You don't know the basic facts about your life, like how much debt you have. When I read this, I was like, crap, this is exactly what I'm doing right now with my money. To be honest, even though I have a rough idea of how much money is coming in every month, right now I do not know how much I spend, how much my profit margins are. And up until very recently, just a few months ago, or a few weeks ago, I actually spent everything I made. Everything that came back, I sort of reinvested back into the business in the form of courses, tools, and mostly random stuff that I've never used and have not moved the needle at all. In step one, there is clearly a gap between where I am now and where I want to be. I hate the fact that I have literally not saved a single cent in years, and honestly, I'm just digging deeper and deeper into my savings, and it's slowly being depleted. I'm sabotaging myself. When I thought about it, I came to realize that I'm actually scared about going into the details and finding out that this content creation business isn't doing as well as it should be. And eventually, I'm going to have to find another office job again, which is my worst professional job fear. I have an immense fear of failure here, and I'm self-sabotaging myself by spending all the money to avoid the uncomfortable truth that being a content creator is actually much harder than it looks. After that, I moved to step 2, and the biggest emotion is just flat out regret. I honestly, truly regret all the money that I spent, and I wish I could get them back, but I can't. But here's what Brianna says about regret. Regret shares is not what we wish we could have done in the past, but what we absolutely need to change going forward. So going forward, I absolutely need to save money. I can't just stick my head in the sand anymore and destroy my financial future because I'm self-sabotaging. This is the best possible way to interpreting a negative emotion. When I hit step 3, here's what meeting my highest potential future self was like. I imagine sitting with my future self about 10 years from now. My future self has a much better daily routine than I do, has a decent amount of money in the bank, as a form of insurance, because this content creation business can be quite risky. My future self has 3 or more profitable YouTube channels and maybe 1 or 2 kids and a retired partner who can help with the kids while I work on my content businesses. Right now, I do not have any of that. So step 4, my micro shifts going forward is to first get my daily routine in order. Right now, I sleep like super late 12 to sometimes 1 a.m. because honestly, I just lack the self-discipline sometimes. And I only start work the next day at about 11 to 12 p.m., which is freakishly terrible, like undisciplined, man. I'm going to have to shift my bedtime earlier by about 5 to 10 minutes every week or so. Next, I've also been blowing all of my income every month, so I need to start saving up as much money as possible by being as scrappy as possible. Currently, I've only got one relatively profitable YouTube channel, so I need to keep on working on my YouTube plan by managing my time better across all the different channels. And as for the kids and retired partner, unfortunately, that cannot happen with that money. So I need to worry about money first before dealing with the rest of the steps. And step 5, I'm starting to feel the adjustment shock when it comes to saving up more money. Over the last few weeks, I've actually started to make better decisions with my spending. And what comes with that is a lot less instant gratification. I no longer feel the dopamine hit from like buying new shit. I used to buy new shit every day. And now it feels uncomfortable that I don't have that dopamine hit. But the fact that I'm aware of this actually really helps a lot. I've also been keeping a list of all the crap I've bought over the last few years, and every time I want to spend on something, I look at that list, I feel the immense regret. And that helps with my spending decisions. It sucks, but I can already see like improvements in my finances already. And that's overall the 5-step process for me. There's actually a lot more in this book that Brianna goes through, but I just pulled out all the strategies that work best for me and whatever light bulb moments I had while reading this book. And I hope it wasn't too selfish. Check out the video on the screen for the best self-help books I've read. Hopefully it'll be out sometime in the future because I have a lot more reading to do, and I'll see you in that one.